Erik Lindqvist's final signal arrived at 2:32 p.m. through his emergency radio. But it wasn't his voice. It was the metallic sound of equipment operating by itself, followed by breathing that didn't seem human, too slow, too deep, as if something massive was inhaling the Arctic air. The GPS continued transmitting for exactly 47 minutes after the silence, but the coordinates were physically impossible, sometimes indicating Erik was 300 meters below the permafrost, other times floating 150 meters above Lake Tornatrask. When the first team reached the exact location in Abisko, they discovered something that violated all laws of physics. Footprints in fresh snow that terminated abruptly in the middle of a clearing, as if Erik had been sucked up by the polar air. Even more disturbing, his GPS remained active, moving in perfect circular patterns at the bottom of the frozen lake. But there were no cracks in the 2-meter-thick ice. The Sami elders called the area where paths bend, referring to ancestral. Stories about people who entered sacred territories during specific auroras and were taken by the breathing mountains. But what happened in the vast Nordic landscapes remains a mystery that even the most experienced Scandinavian search and rescue systems couldn't solve. Erik Lindqvist embodied the perfect archetype of the modern Swede connected to ancestral traditions. At 34, he worked as a GPS navigation systems engineer in Kiruna, ironically specializing in emergency tracking technology for Arctic regions. His technical expertise combined with passion for Lapland nature made him one of the most respected mountaineers in northern Sweden. Born into a family with centuries of Sami tradition, Erik had grown up hearing stories about the living geography of the mountains. His maternal grandmother, one of the last traditional shamans of the region, had always warned about certain areas where the land dreams differently, places that should be avoided during specific atmospheric phenomena. She spoke of temporary paths that appeared only when the northern lights touched the permafrost at specific angles, creating bridges between different versions of reality. Despite his modern technical training, Erik maintained deep respect for ancestral knowledge. He meticulously documented his expeditions, always carrying both cutting-edge GPS equipment and traditional Sami amulets. His mountain journals combined precise coordinates with observations about subtle changes in the personality of landscapes, something his engineer colleagues considered eccentric, but Erik saw as science not yet understood. His final expedition had been planned specifically to coincide with the September equinox, when his grandmother said, "The mountains whisper loudest." Erik wanted to test a personal theory about correlations between electromagnetic activity of auroras and interference in navigation systems. He had modified his GPS equipment to record magnetic anomalies, hoping to scientifically document phenomena his family had known intuitively for generations. Psyche. Abisko community knew him as that quiet Swede who understood both satellite language and Arctic wind patterns. In the village where the last trains from Stockholm dropped off urban adventurers, Erik was respected by local Sami guides who recognized in him someone who honored both modern technology and ancestral wisdom. When he didn't return as planned, concern spread rapidly. Erik was known for his obsessive punctuality and rigorous safety protocols. He would never be late without communication, especially knowing his family monitored his GPS signals in real time through apps he had developed himself. The silence was different, heavier, as if the mountains had swallowed not only Erik, but also all electronic signals connecting him to the modern world. However, behind the quiet life in Nordic lands, there were details no one had noticed, details that would become crucial to understanding how someone can simply vanish in one of the world's most organized and safe regions. The Swedish emergency protocol was activated when Erik didn't show up for work on Monday. Within 2 hours, the Nordic search and rescue machine was operating with military precision. Sjöräddning Sällskapet helicopters took off simultaneously from 3 different bases, while Arctic rescue teams specialized in extreme conditions mobilized from Kiruna to the Norwegian border. The initial operation revealed something deeply disturbing. Erik's GPS signal remained active, but was moving in impossible patterns, perfect circles that no human could traverse, speeds that alternated between completely static and instantaneous displacements of kilometers. Even more unsettling, the signals seemed to be emanating from multiple locations simultaneously, as if there were several Erics scattered across the region. When the first helicopter team reached the original coordinates, they found the most bizarre scene in decades of rescue operations. Eric's footprints were clearly visible in fresh snow, but followed a pattern that defied logic, walking in straight lines for hundreds of meters, then making perfect 90-degree turns, continuing for more meters, and then simply ceasing in the middle of an open clearing, without any physical obstacle explaining the interruption. There were no signs of struggle, no animal tracks, no evidence of dropped equipment. Even more disturbing, the snow around the last footprints was perfectly untouched, as if Eric had been literally sucked upward, without leaving any disturbance in the environment. Nordic international cooperation was immediate and impressive. Norwegians offered cutting-edge thermal drones, Finns sent specialists in Arctic atmospheric phenomena, Danes provided quantum communication equipment. The combined technology represented the most advanced search and rescue systems in the world. During the first 12 hours, an even more unsettling discovery emerged. Other electronic equipment in the region began exhibiting anomalous behavior. Compasses spun erratically, radios picked up transmissions on frequencies that theoretically didn't exist, and thermal cameras detected human heat signatures in locations where there clearly was no one. The local Sami community joined the searches, bringing knowledge that complemented modern technology. Elders who knew every rock formation began discreetly mentioning that the area where Eric disappeared was considered territory between worlds, a place where boundaries between different realities became permeable during specific atmospheric conditions. As hours transformed into endless Arctic night, an unsettling certainty took hold of everyone involved. Eric hadn't simply gotten lost or suffered an accident. Something fundamentally impossible was happening in the mountains of Abisko. If you're interested in disappearance mysteries in Nordic landscapes, leave a like to help us continue bringing these unique stories from Scandinavia, because what we discovered about the first hours of the search would reveal how even the most efficient systems can fail against Nordic vastness. After 48 hours of intensive searches, the official investigation began considering theories that went far beyond conventional accidents. The first hypothesis explored by specialists focused on the treacherous geology specific to Abisko. The region possesses a complex network of natural caves formed by millennial glacial activity, many still not completely mapped. Speleologists brought ground-penetrating radar equipment capable of detecting underground voids up to 50 meters deep. What they discovered defied all geological expectations. Seismic scanners identified a series of natural tunnels that extended much deeper than any known formation in the region should allow. Even more disturbing, these tunnels seemed to form an almost perfect geometric network, with angles and proportions that rarely occur naturally in rock formations. The second line of investigation involved detailed atmospheric analysis. Meteorologists discovered that Eric disappeared during an extremely rare convergence of climatic conditions: unusually intense northern lights activity, atmospheric pressure in free fall, and a phenomenon called Arctic thermal inversion that can create air pockets with altered physical properties. Atmospheric physicists from Uppsala University were called to examine data recorded by automatic weather stations in the region. The results revealed anomalies that didn't correspond to any known atmospheric model. During the exact period of Eric's disappearance, instruments recorded pressure and temperature variations that theoretically could only occur at much higher altitudes or in extreme storm conditions. But it was when investigators began examining historical records that the most unsettling theory emerged. National Library archives revealed that the specific area where Eric disappeared had been mentioned in official reports over the past 200 years as a location of inexplicable events. At least 15 people had disappeared in the same region since 1800, always during similar atmospheric conditions, always following impossible movement patterns. Historical reports described disturbingly similar details: footprints that terminated abruptly, equipment that continued functioning without operators, and sightings of figures walking where they shouldn't be able to walk. A 1943 military report mentioned soldiers who observed through binoculars a person walking vertically on a rock face impossible to climb. During intensive searches, something even more disturbing began emerging from rescue team reports. Multiple, independent groups reported experiences of temporal disorientation in the area. Expeditions that supposedly lasted 2 hours returned, discovering they had been missing for 8 hours, without any memory of the lost periods. Time measurement instruments showed inexplicable discrepancies. Search dogs trained specifically for Arctic rescue demonstrated completely anomalous behavior. Animals that normally followed trails with military precision refused to enter certain areas, showing signs of extreme stress even without visible stimuli. When forced to continue, the dogs frequently began barking at the empty sky or frantically digging in locations where nothing was buried. The melancholic atmosphere typical of Nordic noir began permeating the entire search operation. The silent vastness of Lapland mountains created a growing sensation of human insignificance before forces that transcended scientific understanding. Each day without concrete discoveries deepened the melancholy that characterizes Nordic mysteries, that gradual certainty that some truths remain eternally buried in the unforgiving geography of the North. But as the investigation advanced through the inhospitable northern landscapes, each new piece of evidence only deepened the mystery, confronting investigators with the reality that Nordic nature guards its secrets implacably. 3 months after the disappearance, investigators developed increasingly specific theories about what could have happened to Erik. The first theory explored the possibility that he had discovered one of the forgotten iron mines from Sweden's industrial era. Historical maps revealed that the Abisko region was intensively mined between 1890 and 1920, with hundreds of tunnels excavated in patterns that followed iron ore veins through the mountains. Industrial archaeology specialists brought disturbing evidence. Many of these mines had been precipitously abandoned during World War I, with tunnels inadequately sealed or completely omitted from official records. Some extended for kilometers underground, creating a three-dimensional labyrinth that could easily disorient even experienced mountaineers. The theory suggested Erik could have discovered a hidden entrance and gotten lost in the underground complex. The second theory focused on a geological phenomenon specific to Lapland: magnetic confusion zones. Geologists from Luleå University identified that the region possesses extremely high concentrations of magnetite and other ferromagnetic minerals, capable of drastically interfering with navigation equipment. Reports from other mountaineers confirmed experiences of walking in circles, even following apparently functional compasses and GPS. Tests conducted with precision instruments revealed that certain mountain areas created interference pockets where magnetic fields behaved completely irregularly. Within these zones, compasses pointed false directions, GPS calculated wrong positions, and even mechanical clocks functioned at altered speeds. But it was during winter that the most scientifically disturbing theory emerged. Atmospheric physicists discovered that Erik disappeared during an extremely rare atmospheric event, an Arctic temporal inversion. This phenomenon occurs when air layers with drastically different temperatures create conditions where sound, light, and even gravity behave anomalously. Meteorological records confirmed that the night before the disappearance, Abisko experienced northern lights of exceptional intensity combined with an atmospheric pressure drop that broke historical records. The combination created conditions where atmospheric physics itself functioned in altered ways, potentially causing severe disorientation or even hallucinations in exposed individuals. Sami investigators brought ancestral perspectives that complemented scientific theories. Elders explained that the area where Erik disappeared was traditionally known as place where seasons meet, territory where time didn't follow linear patterns. Stories passed down through generations described people who entered these locations during specific conditions and emerged days later without memory of elapsed time, or who simultaneously experienced multiple seasons of the year. During verification expeditions of these theories, researchers documented phenomena that defied explanation. Thermometers registered different temperatures separated by just a few meters. Audio recorders captured sounds of human footsteps in completely empty areas. Cameras photographed shadows that didn't correspond to visible objects. The most unsettling element emerged when the team tried to replicate exactly the path Eric had followed. Using his recorded GPS coordinates, they discovered that certain parts of the route simply didn't exist in physical terrain. GPS indicated Eric had walked through solid rock formations or over lake areas where there definitely was no ice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next Nordic Mysteries, because what happened next would challenge all expectations about disappearances in one of the world's safest regions. 12 years later, in September 2024, an international expedition of climate researchers was testing cutting-edge thermal drones in Abisko when they made a discovery that completely revolutionized the case. The equipment, capable of detecting heat signatures up to 5 meters below the surface and creating three-dimensional temperature maps, identified a gigantic thermal anomaly exactly in the region where Eric had disappeared. The initial discovery was already impossible. A human body heat mass detected 3 meters underground in an area that had been exhaustively excavated in 2012. But when the data was analyzed in detail, it revealed something even more shocking. The thermal signature was moving, slowly in regular patterns, as if someone was walking in an underground space that geological maps indicated as solid rock. When specialized teams managed to access the location using drilling equipment, they found a natural chamber that simply shouldn't exist. The walls were too smooth for natural formation, but too ancient for human construction. Even more disturbing, the internal temperature was exactly 18 degrees Celsius, impossibly maintained considering the surrounding permafrost. Inside the chamber, they discovered evidence that defied all known laws of physics. Eric's backpack was there, but contained items he definitely didn't possess when he disappeared. Improvised tools made from materials that didn't exist in the region, plant samples that didn't grow in Lapland, and hand-drawn maps of landscapes that didn't correspond to any known geography of Abisko. The most shocking element was in a journal found in the backpack. Clearly dated entries indicated that Eric had been conscious and active during the 12 years of disappearance. The annotations described impossible experiences, exploring an alternative version of Abisko, where seasons changed daily, where walking 5 kilometers could result in displacements of hundreds of kilometers, and where the sun and aurora followed. Completely different patterns. Forensic analysis confirmed that the handwriting was authentically Eric's, and that entries were made progressively over the years. Carbon-14 tests on the ink confirmed the dates, but how was it possible for someone to survive 12 years in an underground chamber without adequate supplies? And how had he documented experiences in a geography that didn't exist? The most recent entry in the journal, dated just 2 weeks before the discovery, simply said, "I finally understand. It's not the mountains that move. We exist in multiple versions simultaneously. When conditions are exact, we can slip between these versions. I'm returning now. I chose the version where you find me." Quantum physics specialists were urgently consulted. Theories about parallel realities and space-time folds began being seriously considered for the first time in an official investigation. The unique combination of geological, atmospheric, and electromagnetic factors in Abisko could, theoretically, create conditions where boundaries between different realities became permeable. But the most extraordinary discovery was still to come. Following detailed instructions left in Eric's journal, the team located an additional entrance to the chamber, a crack in the rock that only became visible during very specific atmospheric conditions. When they managed to access it during a particularly intense northern lights display, they emerged at a location that GPS indicated was 15 kilometers away. The underground journey had taken only 2 hours to traverse, when the surface would require at least 2 days of walking through impossible terrain. Even more impossible during the route, instruments recorded that they were moving through solid rock, but the physical experience was of walking through perfectly passable tunnels. And it was at this moment that the investigation took a completely unexpected turn, revealing that Nordic landscapes hide mysteries much deeper than anyone could imagine. The discovery of the underground chamber and Eric's journal mobilized unprecedented international scientific resources in modern Scandinavian history. Universities throughout the Nordic region sent their best teams specialized in anomalous geological phenomena. The Niels Bohr Institute from Copenhagen brought experimental quantum physics equipment, while the Finnish Meteorological Institute provided atmospheric sensors capable of detecting the smallest variations in electromagnetic fields. The operation transformed into the most ambitious interdisciplinary scientific investigation ever conducted in the Arctic. Atmospheric physicists worked side by side with Sami anthropologists, while geologists constantly consulted local elders who possessed ancestral knowledge about anomalous mountain behaviors. The combination of cutting-edge science with traditional wisdom created a completely new approach to understanding phenomena that transcended conventional scientific categories. Cutting-edge thermal drones, equipped with experimental quantum sensors, began systematically mapping every cubic meter of the region. The results revealed a complex network of thermal anomalies that formed almost perfect geometric patterns through the mountains. Even more disturbing, these anomalies seemed to move and reorganize during specific atmospheric conditions, as if they were a living structure responding to environmental stimuli. During weeks of intensive investigation, the team began documenting phenomena that defied not only conventional explanations, but the very foundations of modern physics. Precision instruments recorded temporal variations in specific areas. Atomic clocks showed microscopic but consistent discrepancies when placed at determined points on the mountain. The most disconcerting element emerged when researchers tried to replicate exactly the conditions described in Eric's journal. Following his detailed instructions about timing, positioning, and atmospheric conditions, they managed to access mountain areas that literally didn't exist on maps. Entire landscapes became visible only during specific convergences of climatic and electromagnetic factors. Sami specialists confirmed that this phenomenon was an integral part of traditional knowledge, referred to as dreaming land territory, where physical reality responded to natural cycles more complex than conventional human understanding. Ancestral stories described exactly the same patterns that modern instruments were recording, validating knowledge passed down through generations through empirical observation. The international investigation attracted attention from renowned quantum physicists and specialists in multiple dimension theories. Concepts that previously existed only in theoretical speculation began being considered as viable explanations for the phenomena documented in Abisko. The possibility of permeable dimensional membranes under specific conditions ceased being science fiction to become a working hypothesis. During this period, other historical disappearance cases in the region were re-examined with new scientific perspective. Patterns emerged clearly. All occurred during similar atmospheric conditions, all involved people with strong connections to Lapland nature, and all left evidence of physically impossible movement through terrain. The international scientific community remained divided between cautious skepticism and genuine fascination. While evidence was irrefutable, the implications challenged fundamental paradigms about the nature of physical reality, forcing reconsideration of theories about time, space, and consciousness. Share this video with someone fascinated by Nordic mysteries. They'll be impressed with this revelation and with what's about to be revealed about the secrets that northern lands guard. In October 2024, exactly 12 years and 1 month after the disappearance, the scientific investigation made a discovery that fundamentally redefined our understanding of reality's nature. Using experimental quantum mapping technology developed specifically for the Abisko project, the team identified what can only be described as an alternative reality bubble in the exact region where Eric had disappeared. The instruments detected a zone where fundamental physical laws functioned in altered ways. Time flowed at different speeds, distances behaved non-Euclideanly, and gravity itself seemed to respond to alternative principles. It was as if a fragment of parallel universe had temporarily overlapped our conventional reality. The most extraordinary discovery came when the team managed to perfectly synchronize all conditions described in Eric's journal: northern lights, valve-specific intensity, exact atmospheric pressure, precise temperature, and correct positioning of electromagnetic equipment. During an opportunity window of exactly 47 minutes, a dimensional rift opened, allowing access to what Eric had called alternative Abisko. When the first exploration team managed to cross this rift, they found themselves in a version of the Lapland, a landscape that followed completely different natural laws. Distances that took hours to traverse in conventional reality could be crossed in minutes through space folds. Seasons changed geographically. Arctic winter a few meters from temperate summer, creating impossible microclimates. Even more impressive, they found Eric, alive, conscious, and appearing exactly the same physical age as when he disappeared 12 years before. He was inhabiting a version of this alternative reality where he had built a sophisticated shelter using techniques that combined ancestral Sami knowledge with intuitive understanding of the environment's altered physical laws. Eric was completely aware of time passage in conventional reality, but explained that in the dimension where he had been living, time and space functioned according to macroscopic quantum principles. He had experienced 12 years of life, exploring impossible landscapes, developing survival techniques that only worked within the altered physical laws, and gradually understanding the multidimensional nature of the Abisko region. During his years in alternative reality, Eric had meticulously documented his discoveries. Detailed maps showed how to navigate between different layers of landscape, techniques for identifying when dimensional rifts became passable, and methods for returning to conventional reality when desired. He had become, essentially, the first scientific explorer of parallel realities. The reunion between Eric and the rescue team was documented with scientific instruments that confirmed the physical impossibility of the situation. Medical examinations performed within alternative reality showed that Eric's body had adapted to different physical laws. His metabolism functioned in altered ways, his reflexes responded to non-conventional gravity, and his sensory perception had expanded to detect additional dimensions of space. But the most shocking moment came when Eric demonstrated how to return to conventional reality. Following protocols he had developed over 12 years, he managed to guide the entire team back through the dimensional rift, emerging exactly at the point where he had originally disappeared. Medical tests performed immediately after return confirmed that Eric had aged only a few weeks during the 12 years of disappearance. His cellular structure showed signs of exposure to non-terrestrial physical conditions, but his general health remained excellent. Most importantly, his mind retained clear and detailed memories of the entire multidimensional experience. The discovery had implications that transcended the individual case. Eric had become living evidence that alternative realities are not just theoretical speculation, but phenomena accessible under specific conditions in unique geographical locations. But even with all advanced technology and Nordic search systems, questions without answers still remained that would echo forever through the vast Scandinavian landscapes. Eric's return to Swedish society after 12 years of absence created unique challenges in modern Scandinavian history. His reintegration was carefully managed by a multidisciplinary team, including doctors specialized in space medicine, psychologists with expertise in extreme traumatic experiences, and quantum physicists capable of understanding the scientific implications of his multidimensional experience. Eric described vivid memories of 12 years lived in an alternative version of the Lapland Mountains, where he had essentially become an interdimensional nomad. He developed survival techniques that functioned only within the altered physical laws of parallel reality, built shelters using architectural principles impossible in our dimension, and established a life routine that combined traditional Sami practices with revolutionary scientific discoveries. Eric's family faced the psychologically complex challenge of reintegrating someone who technically hadn't aged while they processed 12 years of grief and life reconstruction. His wife had begun a new relationship. His children had grown into adults, but Eric remained physically and mentally in the same state as the day of disappearance. The family dynamic became an unprecedented case study about time, loss, and the nature of human continuity. The international scientific community remained divided about the implications of the discoveries. While physical evidence was irrefutable, including materials brought from alternative reality that demonstrated impossible molecular properties, explanations challenged basic foundations of modern physics. Some researchers proposed that Abisko had become the first documented location of natural dimensional anomaly, while skeptics continued seeking conventional explanations. The impact on the Abisko region was transformative. The area became a destination for researchers from around the world, attracting both legitimate scientists and paranormal phenomena enthusiasts. Swedish authorities established rigorous protocols for accessing anomaly zones, balancing scientific interest with public safety and respect for local Sami traditions. Erik chose to remain in the region, working as principal consultant for interdimensional research teams that continued studying the phenomena. His unique ability to navigate between realities made him indispensable for future safe explorations. He developed safety protocols for researchers interested in accessing alternative realities, always emphasizing that such experiences required extreme psychological and physical preparation. Other historical disappearance cases in the region were re-examined with new scientific understanding. Some families who had lost loved ones decades ago renewed hopes, while others found closure, understanding that their relatives might have chosen to remain in alternative realities accessible through Abisko. The characteristic melancholy of Nordic noir remained, however. Even with Erik back and mysteries partially solved, the experience revealed profound truths about reality's fluid nature that many considered more disturbing than consoling. And so while some answers were found in the unforgiving northern landscapes, others remained buried forever in the eternal mists and infinite silence of Nordic lands. Erik Lindqvist's case fundamentally revolutionized our understanding of the relationship between human consciousness and physical reality. The vast Lapland landscapes, previously seen as beautiful but scientifically predictable, revealed themselves to be portals to understandings that transcend conventional physics limitations. The discovery that multiple realities can coexist and become accessible under specific conditions opened profound philosophical questions about the nature of existence. For Nordic communities, especially the Sami, the case represented scientific validation of ancestral knowledge that had been gradually marginalized by modernity. Traditional stories about dreaming land and moving paths were no longer considered folklore, but precise observations of phenomena that science was only beginning to understand. Erik's experience demonstrated that boundaries between science and spirituality are often artificial. Scientific investigation continues in Abisko, now with a completely revolutionary approach that integrates quantum physics with traditional Nordic knowledge. Safety protocols developed by Erik allow controlled exploration of alternative realities, always respecting both scientific rigor and ancestral wisdom about interdimensional navigation. Erik became a unique figure in modern history, someone who physically experienced reality's multidimensional nature and returned to share knowledge. His experience changed not only scientific understanding, but also humanity's emotional and spiritual relationship with landscapes we previously considered completely known. The psychological impact on other families with disappeared loved ones was profound, creating a new category of hope based on possibilities that previously seemed impossible. Simultaneously, the discovery brought ethical responsibilities about how to use knowledge about alternative realities, especially considering that access requires specific conditions and significant risks. The experience also revealed fundamental limitations of conventional scientific method when applied to phenomena that transcend traditional categories of space and time. Researchers were forced to develop completely new methodologies that integrate empirical observation with subjective experience in ways previously considered unscientific. This case reminds us that even in the world's most technologically advanced societies, the vastness of Nordic nature continues being a source of mysteries that challenge our fundamental understanding about reality, consciousness, and the limits of what we consider possible in Scandinavia's eternal landscapes. If this Nordic disappearance story impressed you, leave a like, subscribe to Nordic Missing channel, share with those interested in Scandinavian mysteries, and hit the bell for our upcoming cases. In the comments, tell us your theory about this disappearance. We love your perspectives, and remember, Psyche, dramatic pause. In lands where silence has memory, some mysteries echo forever through the eternal mists of the north.